we will inform you about what the media is hiding. Who is Martin Luther King? A Story from the Beginning. Part 5. For years, Hoover had been suspicious of potential influence of communists in social movements such as labor unions and civil rights. Hoover directed the FBI to track King in 1957 and the SCLC when it was established. Due to the relationship between King and Stanley Levison, the FBI feared Levison was working as an agent of influence over King. In spite of its own reports in 1963 that Levison had left the party and was no longer associated in business dealings with them. Another King lieutenant, Jack Odell, was also linked to the Communist Party by sworn testimony before the House Un-American Activities Committee. Despite the extensive surveillance conducted, by 1976 the FBI had acknowledged that it had not obtained any evidence that King himself or the SCLC were actually involved with any communist organizations. For his part, King adamantly denied having any connections to communism. In a 1965 Playboy interview, he stated that there are as many communists in this freedom movement as there are Eskimos in Florida. He argued that Hoover was following the path of appeasement of political powers in the South, and that his concern for communist infiltration of the civil rights movement was meant to aid and abet the salacious claims of Southern racists and the extreme right-wing elements. Hoover did not believe King's pledge of innocence, and replied by saying that King was the most notorious liar in the country. After King gave his I Have a Dream speech during the March on Washington on August 28, 1963, the FBI described King as the most dangerous and effective Negro leader in the country. It alleged that he was knowingly, willingly, and regularly cooperating with and taking guidance from communists. The attempts to prove that King was a communist was related to the feeling of many segregationists that blacks in the South were content with the status quo, but had been stirred up by communists and outside agitators. As context, the civil rights movement in 1950s and 60 seconds arose from activism within the black community dating back to before World War I. King said that the Negro Revolution is a genuine revolution, born from the same womb that produces all massive social upheavals, the womb of intolerable conditions and unendurable situations. CIA files declassified in 2017 revealed that the agency was investigating possible links between King and communism after a Washington Post article dated November 4, 1964, claimed he was invited to the Soviet Union, and that Ralph Abernathy, as spokesman for King, refused to comment on the source of the invitation. Mail belonging to King and other civil rights activists was intercepted by the CIA program HTLINGUAL. The FBI, having concluded that King was dangerous due to communist infiltration, began attempting to discredit King through revelations regarding his private life. FBI surveillance of King, some of it since made public, attempted to demonstrate that he also had numerous extramarital affairs. Lyndon B. Johnson once said that King was a hypocritical preacher. In his 1989 autobiography, And the Walls Came Tumbling Down, Ralph Abernathy stated that King had a weakness for women, although they all understood and believed in the biblical prohibition against sex outside of marriage. It was just that he had a particularly difficult time with that temptation. In a later interview, Abernathy said that he only wrote the term womanizing, that he did not specifically say King had extramarital sex, and that the infidelities King had were emotional rather than sexual. Abernathy criticized the media for sensationalizing the statements he wrote about King's affairs, such as the allegation that he admitted in his book that King had a sexual affair the night before he was assassinated. In his original wording, Abernathy had stated that he saw King coming out of his room with a woman when he awoke the next morning, and later said that he may have been in there discussing and debating and trying to get her to go along with the movement. I don't know. The sanitation workers strike. In his 1986 book Bearing the Cross, David Garrow wrote about a number of extramarital affairs, including one woman King saw almost daily. According to Garrow, that relationship increasingly became the emotional centerpiece of King's life, but it did not eliminate the incidental couplings of King's travels. He alleged that King explained his extramarital affairs as a form of anxiety reduction. Garrow asserted that King's supposed promiscuity caused him painful and at times overwhelming guilt. King's wife Coretta appeared to have accepted his affairs with equanimity, saying once that all that other business just doesn't have a place in the very high-level relationship we enjoyed. Shortly after Bearing the Cross was released, civil rights author Howell Raines gave the book a positive review but opined that Garrow's allegations about King's sex life were sensational, and stated that Garrow was amassing facts rather than analyzing them. The FBI distributed reports regarding such affairs to the executive branch, friendly reporters, potential coalition partners, and funding sources of the SCLC and King's family. The Bureau also sent anonymous letters to King threatening to reveal information if he did not cease his civil rights work. The FBI, King's suicide letter sent to King just before he received the Nobel Peace Prize read, in part, "The American public, the church organizations that have been helping, Protestants, Catholics, and Jews will know you for what you are, an evil beast. So will others who have backed you. You are done, King. There is only one thing left for you to do. You know what it is. You have just 34 days in which to do. You are done. There is but one way out for you. You better take it before your filthy, fraudulent self is bared to the nation." The letter was accompanied by a tape recording, excerpted from FBI wiretaps, of several of King's extramarital liaisons. King interpreted this package as an attempt to drive him to suicide, although William Sullivan, head of the Domestic Intelligence Division at the time, argued that it may have only been intended to convince Dr. King to resign from the SCLC. King refused to give in to the FBI's threats. In 1977, Judge John Lewis Smith Jr. ordered all known copies of the recorded audio tapes and written transcripts resulting from the FBI's electronic surveillance of King between 1963 and 1968 to be held in the National Archives and sealed from public access until 2027. In May 2019, an FBI file emerged on which a handwritten note alleged that King looked on, laughed, and offered advice as one of his friends raped a woman. Expert professional historians of the period who have examined this notional evidence have dismissed it as highly unreliable. David Garrow, author of an earlier biography of King, wrote that the suggestion that he either actively tolerated or personally employed violence against any woman, even while drunk, poses so fundamental a challenge to his historical stature as to require the most complete and extensive historical review possible. Garrow's reliance on a handwritten note addended to a typed report is considered poor scholarship by several other authorities. The professor of American Studies at the University of Nottingham, Peter Ling, pointed out that Garrow was excessively credulous, if not naive, in accepting the accuracy of FBI reports during a period when the FBI was undertaking a massive operation to attempt to discredit King as part of its COINTELPRO activities. Garrow had earlier referred to Ling's work on King, widely considered authoritative, as thoughtful, perceptive, and thoroughly well-informed. Experts in 20th century American history, including distinguished professor of political science Jean Theoharis, the professors Barbara Ransby of the University of Illinois at Chicago, Nathan Connolly of Johns Hopkins University, and Professor Emeritus of History Glenda Gilmore of Yale University have expressed reservations about Garrow's scholarship. Theoharis commented, "Most scholars I know would penalize graduate students for doing this. It is not the first time the care and rigor of Garrow's work has been called into serious question." Claiborne Carson, Martin Luther King biographer and overseer of the Dr. King records at Stanford University, states that he came to the opposite conclusion of Garrow, saying none of this is new. Garrow is talking about a recently added summary of a transcript of a 1964 recording from the Willard Hotel that others, including Mrs. King, have said they did not hear Martin's voice on it. The added summary was 4 layers removed from the actual recording. This supposedly new information comes from an anonymous source in a single paragraph in an FBI report. You have to ask, how could anyone conclude King looked at a rape from an audio recording in a room where he was not present? Carson bases his position of Coretta Scott King's memoirs, where she states, "I set up our reel-to-reel recorder and listened. I have read scores of reports talking about the scurrilous activities of my husband, but once again, there was nothing at all incriminating on the tape. It was a social event with people laughing and telling dirty jokes. But I did not hear Martin's voice on it, and there was nothing about sex or anything else resembling the lies J. Edgar and the FBI were spreading." The tapes that could confirm or refute the allegation are scheduled to be declassified in 2027. A fire station was located across from the Lorraine Motel, next to the boarding house in which James Earl Ray was staying. Police officers were stationed in the fire station to keep King under surveillance. Agents were watching King at the time he was shot. Immediately following the shooting, officers rushed out of the station to the motel. Merrill McAuliffe, an undercover police officer, was the first person to administer first aid to King. The antagonism between King and the FBI, the lack of an all-points bulletin to find the killer, and the police presence nearby led to speculation that the FBI was involved in the assassination. King was awarded at least 50 honorary degrees from colleges and universities. On October 14, 1964, King became the youngest winner of the Nobel Peace Prize, which was awarded to him for leading nonviolent resistance to racial prejudice in the U.S. In 1965, he was awarded the American Liberties Medallion by the American Jewish Committee for his exceptional advancement of the principles of human liberty. In his acceptance remarks, King said, "Freedom is one thing. You have it all or you are not free." In 1957, he was awarded the Spingarn Medal from the NAACP. 2 years later, he won the Anisfield Wolf Book Award for his book Stride Toward Freedom, The Montgomery Story. In 1966, the Planned Parenthood Federation of America awarded King the Margaret Sanger Award for his courageous resistance to bigotry and his lifelong dedication to the advancement of social justice and human dignity. Also in 1966, King was elected as a Fellow of the American Academy of Arts and Sciences. In November 1967, he made a 24-hour trip to the United Kingdom to receive an honorary doctorate in civil law from Newcastle University, becoming the first African American the institution had recognized in this way. In a moving impromptu acceptance speech, he said, "There are three urgent and indeed great problems that we face not only in the United States of America, but all over the world today. That is the problem of racism, the problem of poverty, and the problem of war." In addition to his nominations for 3 Grammy Awards, King posthumously won for Best Spoken Word Recording in 1971 for Why I Oppose the War in Vietnam. In 1977, the Presidential Medal of Freedom was posthumously awarded to King by President Jimmy Carter. The citation read, "Martin Luther King Jr. was the conscience of his generation. He gazed upon the Great Wall of segregation and saw that the power of love could bring it down. From the pain and exhaustion of his fight to fulfill the promises of our founding fathers for our humblest citizens, he wrung his eloquent statement of his dream for America. He made our nation stronger because he made it better. His dream sustains us yet." King and his wife were also awarded the Congressional Gold Medal in 2004. King was second in Gallup's list of most widely admired people of the 20th century. In 1963, he was named Time Person of the Year, and, in 2000, he was voted 6th in an online Person of the Century poll by the same magazine. King placed 3rd in the Greatest American contest conducted by the Discovery Channel and AOL. On April 20, 2016, Treasury Secretary Jacob Lew announced that the $5, $10, and $20 bills would all undergo redesign prior to 2020. Lew said that while Lincoln would remain on the front of the $5 bill, the reverse would be redesigned to depict various historical events that had occurred at the Lincoln Memorial. Among the planned designs are images from King's I Have a Dream speech and the 1939 concert by opera singer Marian Anderson. Many memorial sites, buildings, and sculptures have been created to honor Martin Luther King Jr., including the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial Library in Washington, D.C., the Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. Library, located in downtown San Jose, California, and the Martin Luther King Jr. Memorial located in West Potomac Park next to the National Mall in Washington, D.C. Many other memorials have been made in the United States of America and in other countries to honor his legacy. Thank you for watching.